So, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is pretty famed for roasting MAGA. In fact, one can say that he politely tells them to go fuck themselves and they thank him for the opportunity. Well, he really laid into Trump's latest cuck, vice presidential nominee JD Vance, when he stopped by real time with Bill Maher last night.
And of course, the other thing you get to do at a convention is roll out your vice presidential candidate, which in this case was JD Vance.
Yeah.
I know him a little bit.
What do you think of him?
Look, we're from the same generation. We're both from the Midwest, different parts of the Midwest.
Right.
I know a lot of guys like JD Vance. I've run into a lot of guys like him. Not so much when I was growing up in Indiana.
Thiel.
But,
Peter Thiel is his big backer.
yeah, for sure. And,
Okay, if people don't know who that is, he started PayPal.
Yeah.
He's gay. He's a billionaire. I mean, I've had a couple of people who knew you were coming on this week said, ask Pete what he thinks about Peter Thiel being so in love with JD Vance, who is flatly against gay marriage.
So I think it's a profound contradiction, but maybe it's not that complicated. I know there are a lot of folks who say, what's going on with some of these Silicon Valley folks veering into Trump world with JD Vance and backing Trump? What are they thinking? Silicon Valley is supposed to be, they're supposed to care about climate. They're supposed to be, I don't know, pro-science and rational and libertarians. So normally libertarians don't like authoritarians. What's up with that? I think it's actually, we've made it way too complicated. It's super simple. These are very rich men who have decided to back the Republican Party that tends to do good things for very rich men.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
And by the way, that's kind of what you're getting with. That's kind of what you're getting with JD, right? So I knew a lot of people like him when I got to Harvard. I found a lot of people like him who would say whatever they needed to get ahead. And 5 years ago, that seemed like being the anti-Trump Republican, so that's what he was. Talked about how he was unfit, how he was cynical, called him an opioid, which is kind of a weird thing to say about a person, but definitely a really... But I mean, for somebody whose identity is that they're connected to Appalachia, which has an opioid crisis, that really is the darkest thing you could possibly say about Donald Trump, at least in public. But behind the scenes, apparently, he's actually calling him Hitler, right? Seriously. 5 years later, the way he gets ahead is that he's the greatest guy since sliced bread. And I actually watched this exact same process with somebody else I got to know in my days in the Midwest, which was my former governor, Mike Pence, who I watched start out as an evangelical Christian who cared about rectitude and family values, and then get on board with a guy who was mixed up with a porn star, make excuses for him, so that he could have power. And then he did. He got 4 glorious years, I guess, as vice president of the United States. And it ended on the west front of the Capitol with Trump supporters proposing that he be hanged for using the one shred of integrity he still had to stand up to an attempt to overthrow the government. Right. So I guess, maybe not as a politician, but as a human being, what I'll say is that I hope things work out a little bit better for JD Vance than they did for Mike Pence.
Whoa. Whoa. Too soon. Mayor Pete actually brings up a very interesting point. You would think that the very liberal, libertarian, orgy party having sector of Silicon Valley would firmly be more Democratic leaning, right? Now, Silicon Valley doesn't have a lot of farms, but what it has a shitload of is a bunch of greedy-ass rich people who never want to pay taxes. Take, for example, Peter Thiel. Despite the fact that he is a open homosexual, which is kind of weird when you're in the Republican Party and an open homosexual, since I believe that party is so deeply in the closet that they should not be getting money to build a wall. They should be getting money to build a bigger closet. They're so deep in the closet that they are finding Christmas presents and halfway into Narnia. Anyhow, during his time working in venture capital in San Francisco, JD Vance became a protege, rather, of Peter Thiel, the PayPal co-founder, who is considered something of like a kingmaker in Silicon Valley. So naturally, when Vance ran for the Senate, Thiel gave him a shit ton of money, fueled his run with a $15 million donation. Now, if only there was some sort of video to look into this sordid relationship. Oh, fuck, there is. Here we go.
Even though the audience, the television audience for this convention thus far has not been particularly large by modern standards, one might expect that people will tune in tonight. to hear from this new running mate for Donald Trump, who many people will have never heard of before this week. JD Vance is not a widely known public figure. He is best known for having written a well-received autobiography, which he started while he was at Yale Law School. Mr. Vance also served for 6 months in Iraq as a public affairs unit officer in the Marine Corps. Served in a public affairs unit in the Marine Corps. Yes, even the Marines do have public relations. They're great at it, in fact. But that is the type of unit, a public affairs unit, that he was in when he was in Iraq. After he did his law degree, again at Yale, he became a protege of a very right-wing billionaire who you might remember from the first Republican National Convention that nominated Donald Trump for president. He had a primetime speaking slot. It was one of the weirder speeches of the 2016 RNC. His name is Peter Thiel. He got J.D. Vance a job at a biotech company in San Francisco after J.D. Vance graduated from law school. Peter Thiel got him that job, literally. The company's CEO says explicitly that J.D. Vance was hired, quote, as a favor to Peter, meaning as a favor to Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel then got J.D. Vance a second job. He directed one of his venture capital companies that they, too, should hire J.D. Vance. See, this is why these guys are so against any kind of affirmative action, because clearly they got where they are in this life out of sheer merit, as represented by having your billionaire friend call people and tell them to hire you, even though they're not sure why they're supposed to be hiring you. After Mr. Vance washed out of the second job that Peter Thiel gave him, Mr. Vance then got another job at a different venture capital firm with another tech billionaire, with Steve Case, who founded AOL. How did that one work out? Mr. Case is on the record saying, quote, he wasn't really working very much. Nevertheless, Mr. Vance then was able to go and start another venture capital firm with, surprise, yet more help from Peter Thiel. Like Mr. Thiel, who has named his companies after things in the Lord of the Rings series of J.R.R. Tolkien books. Lord of the Rings is a sort of favorite cosmos for naming things and cultural references for a lot of far-right and alt-right figures, both in Europe and the United States. Peter Thiel names all these things after Tolkien figures and places, like his company Palantir, for example. Like his mentor, like Peter Thiel, who had given him all his jobs in the world, Mr. Vance also, when he founded his own venture capital firm with help from Peter Thiel, named it after a Lord of the Rings thing. He called it Narya, Narya, which you can remember because it's Aryan, but you move the end.
Wow. Well, boys and girls, I think we learned a couple of things there. One, Peter Thiel is one creepy as hell motherfucker. Two, seems like JD Vance has just kind of coasted through life with the help of his billionaire pals. Shall I say a billionaire PayPal? All right, I'm sorry for that. Well, I'm Michael Hayne. This is Really American. If you enjoy our content, please hit that subscribe button. See you later.